Have you noticed how a single tone of voice can live inside you for hours? How a harmless comment can echo in your chest long after the conversation has ended? How joy sometimes arrives so intensely it almost hurts to hold? You feel everything deeply, not just in your heart, but in your body, in your breath, in the quiet spaces between thoughts. While others move on with ease, you stay behind with the weight of a moment pressed against your ribs, wondering why your inner world reacts as if every emotion is an event, every feeling a storm. The room may be calm, but inside you, the air is always shifting. You feel it when admiration warms your skin too quickly, when disappointment settles into your stomach like a stone, when tension lingers in your shoulders long after danger has passed. Silence feels loud to you. Distance feels personal. Even happiness can overwhelm you, as if your nervous system doesn't know how to receive emotion halfway. You are not just experiencing life, you are absorbing it. And somewhere along the way, you began to wonder if something is wrong with you for feeling this much, for not being able to turn the volume down when everyone else seems to live at a softer frequency. You see it in small moments, in the way a child once sat quietly on the edge of a room, watching faces instead of playing, learning early that emotions could shift without warning. You see it later in the adult who replays conversations at night, searching for meaning between words that may not have been intended to wound, yet still left bruises behind the eyes. You feel it in relationships, where love can feel like oxygen and fear of loss can feel like suffocation, where connection and danger sit too closely together inside your chest. Psychology would say your brain is wired for heightened emotional processing, that your amygdala listens more closely for threat and significance, that your nervous system learned to stay alert long before you ever chose it. Philosophy would whisper that sensitivity is not weakness, but a form of perception that comes with both sight and sorrow. Yet neither explanation fully captures what it feels like to carry this intensity alone, to wear a calm mask over an inner weather that never fully clears. You begin to sense that this is not just about being emotional, not about being too soft or too dramatic, but about something deeper etched into your inner architecture. A shadow follows your feelings, a quiet question you rarely speak aloud. Why does everything touch you this deeply? And why can you not simply feel less? And as that question lingers in the dark corners of your awareness, another truth slowly begins to surface, barely visible but impossible to ignore, that this depth of feeling did not suddenly appear in adulthood, that it was shaped quietly, long before you ever learned to name it. Have you ever wondered why your body reacts before your mind can explain? Why tension moves through you like a reflex instead of a decision? Long before you learned the language of emotion, your nervous system was already listening. You were once a child standing quietly at the edge of a room, watching faces instead of toys, studying tone instead of words, learning that safety did not arrive loudly, but in fragile, unpredictable signals. A sigh meant more than a sentence. A slammed door meant more than anger. Love was not something you assumed. It was something you learned to monitor. In some homes, affection came in sudden waves and vanished just as quickly. In others, silence replaced warmth, and a child learned that emotional absence could feel just as heavy as conflict. You may have grown up too early, carrying adult awareness in a small body, learning to regulate the emotions of others before understanding your own. Attachment theory would later explain what you lived through without knowing its name, that when care is inconsistent, the child adapts by becoming hyper-attuned, emotionally alert, scanning for danger and reassurance at the same time. Your brain did not become sensitive by nature alone, it became sensitive because it had to. Neuroscience would eventually reveal that young nervous systems wire themselves around what they repeatedly experience. Stress hormones carve pathways, uncertainty sharpens perception. Emotional unpredictability teaches the brain to stay awake even when the body is tired. You learn to listen between words, to read the air itself, and what begins as protection slowly becomes identity. The shadow forms quietly, not as fear alone, but as constant readiness, the feeling that something might shift at any moment, and you must be prepared to feel it first. You can still see that child in you now, the one who held their breath during arguments, who learned to smile even while sensing the storm behind someone's eyes. You became skilled at interpreting micro-expressions, at adjusting your own emotions to stabilize the room, at becoming the emotional oxygen for others while quietly learning how little you needed for yourself. The garden inside you learned to survive without water, and so it grew roots deep instead of wide. But survival has a cost. Hypervigilance feels like intuition in adulthood. Emotional monitoring feels like empathy. And yet, beneath the mask of emotional intelligence, the monster within never truly sleeps. You are still that child in the corner of the room, feeling everything before it fully happens, carrying resentment you cannot name, loneliness you cannot trace, and a fear that safety is always temporary. What once protected you now shapes the way love, danger, and meaning all arrive wrapped together in your chest. And as time moves forward, you begin to notice that the child who learned to feel everything never stopped feeling that way. Only now they wear an adult face, carrying the same ancient alertness into relationships, decisions, and the quiet moments where the past still whispers through the present. Have you noticed how people often describe you as intuitive, emotionally intelligent, even wise beyond your years, without ever seeing the quiet exhaustion behind your eyes? You learned early how to read the room, and now as an adult, that skill has become your mask. You sense shifts in tone before words change, feel emotional distance before it's spoken, detect tension behind smiles that others trust without question. On the surface, you appear calm, grounded, deeply empathetic. Beneath that surface, an inner storm never truly rests. You live inside the space between what is said and what is meant. A delayed message can tighten your chest for hours. A short reply can feel like rejection dressed as convenience. A subtle change in someone's energy can send your thoughts spiraling through memory and fear, searching for what you might have done wrong. To others, it looks like sensitivity. To you, it feels like standing guard over your own heart, day and night, as if rest itself were dangerous. In relationships, you become the emotional oxygen mask, steady, supportive, endlessly attuned, often forgetting to breathe for yourself. You sense your partner's doubts before they speak them, carry the weight of their moods as if they were instructions written into your nervous system. Love feels vast and beautiful, but it also feels like walking through fog where every step might be the one that causes abandonment. Your shadow grows heavier in intimacy, where closeness awakens the deepest fear of loss. Neuroscience would say your brain learned to associate emotional shifts with survival long ago, that your amygdala still reacts as if every silence might be a threat, every change an alarm. What once helped you stay safe now turns ordinary moments into emotional earthquakes. Your mind becomes a full-time translator of feeling, decoding every glance, every pause, every unsent message. You over-process not because you choose to, but because your nervous system was trained to never assume stability. And so you carry two identities at once. There is the version of you the world sees, compassionate, grounded, emotionally available. Then there is the version that stands behind your eyes, calculating emotional risk, rehearsing conversations, carrying a quiet doubt about your own worth. The garden within you grows lush with feeling, but it often grows without water, sustained by attention rather than rest. This double life creates a loneliness few recognize. You are surrounded by people who trust your strength yet rarely ask if you are tired. You become the listener who is rarely heard, the stable presence who secretly longs to be held without having to explain why. And somewhere inside that loneliness, a question quietly forms, almost too frightening to name. What if this intensity is not just emotional depth, but a pattern etched into your brain itself, shaping the way you experience reality? Why does your body react before your logic can catch up? Why does your heart race at the hint of disapproval? Why does a memory return with the same force as the moment it was created? You often tell yourself that you are choosing to feel this deeply, that you are overthinking, that you should be able to stop. But beneath choice lives something older and quieter, a nervous system trained to listen too closely for danger, for meaning, for shifts that others never register. Your brain learned early that emotion was information, and now it treats every feeling as urgent. Inside your mind, the amygdala, the part responsible for detecting threat, fires faster and louder than it does for most people. Neuroscience shows that when this wiring becomes sensitized in childhood, emotional responses don't wait for permission. They arrive fully formed. A tiny stimulus becomes a full-body reaction. A look becomes a memory. A tone becomes a warning. Emotional memory grows teeth, and the past begins to live inside the present without asking to be invited. What you feel is not imagination alone. It is a nervous system that learns survival through emotional alertness. Attachment theory explains the blueprint beneath the wiring. When comfort came inconsistently, your brain learned that love might disappear without warning. Security became something to earn, not something to expect. And so, emotional regulation never grew in stillness. It grew in movement, in constant scanning, in managing the air inside a room before anyone noticed it shifting. Your nervous system did not learn how to rest inside connection. It learned how to stay awake inside it. You feel this biology play out in small, exhausting ways. After conflict, your body stays tense for hours or days, as if danger has refused to leave the room. After closeness, your thoughts race with fear of loss. Emotional flooding arrives without warning, wave after wave of thought and sensation, until you feel drowned in what others might call a minor moment. This is sensory processing sensitivity, woven together with trauma-shaped perception. Your system doesn't just interpret emotion, it amplifies it. So you wear the mask of control while carrying the monster within. To others you appear composed. Inside, your shadow is made of memory and anticipation, constantly whispering what might go wrong. Your inner garden grows thick with feeling, yet it often grows without water, sustained by vigilance rather than peace. And even when nothing is happening, your body remains slightly braced, as if waiting for the next emotional impact to arrive. The most painful realization is not that your emotions are intense, but that they feel automatic, as if they belong to a system that no longer asks for your consent. What once kept you safe now keeps you restless. What once helped you survive now follows you into rooms where no danger exists. And as you begin to sense that this depth of feeling is not just who you are, but how you were wired, another truth quietly begins to form. That a survival pattern, when it outlives its danger, can slowly turn into a private suffering. Have you ever felt your own thoughts turn against you, as if the very depth that once made you feel alive now pulls you under without warning? What began as sensitivity slowly sharpens into something darker, something that watches you from behind your own eyes. Your imagination, once a place of beauty and connection, becomes a weapon that replays moments with merciless precision. You revisit a look, a sentence, a silence again and again, until uncertainty hardens into conviction and fear begins to feel like certainty. To the outside world, you still appear calm. You smile, you listen, you move through rooms without alarming anyone. Inside, however, the ocean rises. Emotion floods through you in unpredictable tides. Shame for things you never meant to break. Jealousy for threats that may not even exist. Grief for losses that have not yet happened. You learn to drown quietly. You learn how to gasp for air without making noise. The mask grows heavier as the monster within grows more articulate, whispering what you should have said, what you could still lose, what this moment secretly means about your worth. You see it in the adult who lies awake at night while the world sleeps, replaying conversations like evidence in a private trial, trying to prove that the pain makes sense. You see it in the partner who feels love with an intensity that borders on terror, where closeness feels holy but also dangerous, where attachment awakens old fears of abandonment that were never fully buried. The shadow takes what you feel and teaches you how to turn it inward, how to become both the wounded child and the relentless judge. Psychology would call this rumination, the looping of emotional memory through neural pathways that grow stronger with every repetition. Neuroscience would explain how threat circuits, once activated, resist returning to rest, but none of that language captures the lived weight of emotional spirals. The way fear feels like prophecy. The way shame feels like truth. the way your heart can race as if running from something that no one else can see. Your garden overflows with feeling, but the water has turned heavy, pooling instead of nourishing. This is the paradox of depth. The same sensitivity that allows you to feel beauty in small moments also magnifies pain until it feels unbearable. You can be moved to tears by kindness and undone by a passing doubt. You carry oceans inside a body that the world assumes is built for rivers. And so you learn to apologize for your intensity, to hide the storms beneath politeness, to resent yourself for the very thing that once felt like your gift. Yet even as the shadow tightens its grip, something else remains quietly unfinished. The realization that this darkness did not grow in isolation, that it was shaped not only by your mind, but by a world that has learned how to reward emotional captivity while calling it depth. And it is toward that quiet, invisible influence that your story now begins to turn. Have you noticed how the world now asks for your emotions as proof of your humanity, as if what you feel must always be visible, immediate, and shared to be real? You live inside a culture that never stops touching your nervous system. Notifications arrive like small emotional tremors. Stories of pain, anger, heartbreak, and comparison flow toward you without pause. You are invited to care about everything at once, to react to everything at once, and slowly, silently, your nervous system learns that rest is irresponsible and calm is suspicious. As a child, you once looked outward for safety. As an adult, the world looks back at you through glowing screens, demanding your attention, your outrage, your grief, your empathy. Hyperconnectivity blurs the line between your inner life and the emotional storms of strangers. You absorb moods that were never yours to carry. You watch lives curated for triumph and perfection, while your own quiet struggles unfold off camera. Comparison becomes a mirror that always reflects what you are not yet, what you should already be, what everyone else seems to manage with ease. Even love has been reshaped into spectacle. Relationships are no longer private gardens. They are performances measured by intensity, drama, and emotional display. You are taught that if it doesn't hurt deeply, it doesn't matter deeply. Trauma bonding is mistaken for intimacy. Emotional volatility is mistaken for passion. And so you learn to equate suffering with meaning, to believe that peace must be empty because it is quiet. Your shadow grows stronger in a world that rewards emotional bleeding while rarely teaching how to heal. Productivity guilt weaves itself into your emotional body as well. You are taught that rest must be earned through exhaustion, that stillness is laziness in disguise. Even your worth becomes emotional labor, measured by how much you give, how much you feel, how deeply you care. You wear the mask of competence while the monster within whispers that you are never enough, never doing enough, never feeling enough in the right way at the right time. Philosophy would say that a culture obsessed with expression slowly forgets the value of containment. Sensitivity becomes currency. Reaction becomes identity. You are no longer asked who you are in stillness, only who you are in motion. The garden within you grows crowded with borrowed emotions, but the soil beneath them is slowly depleted. You feel full and empty at the same time, and so you continue, trained without being told, reinforced without being named, rewarded for overexposure while punished for inner boundaries. You begin to sense that your emotional intensity is not only personal history or neural wiring, but something tuned and amplified by the world around you. And as you carry this training quietly through the years, another truth waits ahead. The cost of living this way does not arrive all at once, but slowly, in the shape of what it leaves behind. Have you ever wondered why you feel so tired even on days when nothing seems to happen? Why your body feels heavy after conversations that looked harmless on the surface? The cost of feeling everything is not paid all at once. It is collected quietly in small emotional withdrawals that accumulate over years. You carry anxiety like background noise, a low hum beneath your thoughts, always present even when nothing is actively wrong. Your mind rarely rests. At night, when the world finally softens, your thoughts do not. They replay the day like a private cinema of doubt and memory, searching for meaning, for danger, for what you might have missed. You see it in the adult who lies beside someone they love, yet feels strangely alone, because closeness no longer feels safe, only intense. Relationships grow heavy instead of warm. Every bond asks for so much emotional labor that love begins to feel like work rather than refuge. You fear abandonment even while being held. You fear disappointment even while being praised. Attachment no longer feels like connection. It feels like survival disguised as intimacy. The mask stays on, but the face beneath it grows tired of smiling. Emotionally, you live in a state of quiet depletion. You give deeply, you care deeply, you absorb deeply, but the garden within you grows without water. Emotional fatigue settles into your bones. You begin to feel resentful toward your own heart for demanding so much from you, for never letting moments pass without turning them into something to process, something to carry, something to feel twice as hard as necessary. Loneliness becomes paradoxical. You are surrounded by people, yet you rarely feel seen in the way you ache to be seen, without having to explain your storms. Your sense of self begins to blur as well. When you feel so deeply, your identity becomes tied to your emotions. You are what you feel in any given moment. A bad day becomes a bad self. A moment of rejection becomes proof of unworthiness. Emotional dependence slips in quietly, where the state of your nervous system depends on how others treat you, how they text you, how they look at you, how safely they hold your fears. The monster within grows more powerful when your worth begins to live outside your own hands. Neuroscientifically, this is what happens when a nervous system lives too long in readiness. Emotional resilience erodes not through drama, but through overuse. The circuits of stress fire so often that calm begins to feel unfamiliar, even suspicious. Rest feels undeserved, peace feels temporary, and so you remain braced even in stillness, waiting for the next emotional impact to arrive. Yet beneath all this quiet suffering, something remains unbroken. A part of you begins to sense that this intensity, however deep, does not have to be a life sentence. That what was learned through survival might be relearned through safety. And as this realization begins to form, slowly and without urgency, your story starts to turn, not away from depth, but toward a way of carrying it without being crushed by it. Have you ever wondered what it might feel like to experience emotion without being swallowed by it? To let feeling move through you without turning into a flood that rearranges your entire identity? Healing, for you, does not arrive like a dramatic breakthrough or a sudden transformation. It arrives quietly, almost invisibly, in the smallest shifts of how you meet your inner world. It begins the moment you pause instead of react, the moment you notice a wave rising inside you and choose to stand still rather than be carried away by it. At first, it feels unnatural. Your nervous system is used to responding at full speed, to absorbing before it understands, to feeling before it chooses. Yet slowly, through repetition and safety, your body begins to learn a new rhythm. Neuroscience tells us that regulation is not a single skill, but a relationship between breath, sensation, and awareness. You discover that when you soften your breathing, your thoughts begin to soften too. When you anchor into your body, the storm inside your mind loses some of its authority. The monster within does not disappear, but it grows quieter when it is no longer fed by panic. You start to sense the difference between observing an emotion and becoming it. A moment of sadness no longer means you are broken. A surge of fear no longer means danger is real. You allow feeling to pass through you like weather instead of treating it like prophecy. Boundaries begin to form, not walls of coldness, but soft borders of ownership. You begin to realize that not every emotion in the room belongs to you. Not every silence is yours to translate. Not every tension is yours to resolve. You see this shift reflected in small human moments. The child inside you no longer scans every face for approval. The adult inside you no longer carries every relationship like a fragile glass vessel. Even in love, you begin to breathe again. Attachment theory would say this is the movement from anxious vigilance toward earned security, where connection no longer requires self-erasure. You learn that your worth is not proven by how much you endure, how deeply you feel, or how much you sacrifice for others. The garden within you, once overgrown and thirsty, begins to receive water in quieter ways. Rest without guilt, solitude without shame, expression without collapse. You do not become numb, you become sovereign. Your emotions remain deep, but they no longer define the borders of who you are. You still feel waves, but you no longer confuse waves with the ocean. The mask you once wore for survival grows lighter, and for the first time you sense that your depth can exist without constant suffering. And as this quiet revolution unfolds within you, another realization begins to take shape, subtle but powerful, that your sensitivity was never meant to be your prison. It was meant to be your instrument, and how you choose to carry it from here will echo far beyond this moment, into the meaning you make of your life itself. What if the story you have been telling yourself all these years is wrong? What if you were never too sensitive, too intense, too emotional to exist fully in this world, but simply too exposed for too long? You learned to carry storms without shelter, and then blamed yourself for getting wet. Somewhere along the way, the world taught you that your depth was the problem, when the truth is far quieter and far kinder. You were never given the walls you needed to rest against while the wind passed. You see it now in the small memories that return differently than they used to. The child who felt everything did not fail to adapt. They adapted perfectly to an environment that required constant alertness. The adult who overfeels is not broken. They are consistent. Their nervous system kept the promise it made long ago: to stay awake, to stay ready, to stay alive in emotional weather that never fully cleared. The shadow you once tried to outrun was never your enemy. It was your earliest guardian. Philosophy has always whispered this truth beneath its loudest questions, that meaning does not arise from self-erasure, but from self-holding. Sensitivity becomes suffering only when it grows without safety. A garden does not drown because it holds water. It drowns when the ground beneath it has no structure. Your emotions did not become heavy because they were deep. They became heavy because you carried them without a place to set them down. You were taught that strength meant enduring quietly, that worth meant giving endlessly, that love meant feeling endlessly. And so you learned to wear the mask of endurance while the monster within grew tired of being misunderstood. You called your exhaustion weakness. You called your longing dependence. You called your need for rest failure. Yet beneath all those names, one simple truth remained untouched. You only asked for what you were never given. Now, as the dust begins to settle, you stand at a different threshold. You no longer seek to become less. You seek to become safer within yourself. Attachment no longer feels like a battlefield you must survive. Emotion no longer feels like an identity you must perform. You still feel deeply, but your feelings no longer decide who you are. You are not the storm. You are the one who now knows how to build shelter within it. And perhaps this is the quietest truth of all, the one that lingers when every explanation falls silent, that your depth was never meant to destroy you, only to reveal you. That emotional intensity was never the enemy of your peace, only the messenger that asked you to learn how to hold yourself without sacrifice. And as this realization settles into your bones, not as an answer but as a permission, your story does not end. It simply learns how to breathe.